is Daniel K1. This is Eliel. We'll be speaking first on the neg. You guys ready?
You're ready.
You guys ready? Hold on, I'm sorry. I gotta share this to Eliel really quick.
Bro.
Okay, there you go. Alright, you guys are, for the purpose of this debate, we will define Japanese Constitution of 1947 as the post-World War II Constitution written by Japan under the supervision of the United States General Douglas MacArthur that stripped Emperor Hirohito of all but symbolic power, and it also introduced popular sovereignty in Japan per Columbia Dictionary. Article 9 as an article part of the post-World War II Constitution written under the supervision of United States General Douglas MacArthur that stated that Japan would not maintain an active military as well as disabling them to use war as a means of foreign conflicts, and offensive military capabilities as military capabilities that are designed for attack, and that's per Collins Dictionary. Contention 1, Japan as a protection of the United States. After World War II, the United States began to amend its relations with Japan, and in 1960, the two countries signed the Treaty of Mutual Cooperation and Security, which created military cooperation between the United States and Japan. Packard 10, journalist George Packard of Foreign Affairs wrote in 2010 that it committed the United States to help defend Japan if Japan came under attack, and it provided bases and ports for U.S. armed forces in Japan. The agreement has endured through half a century of dramatic changes. The United States to this day still fully upholds this treaty. In fact, Joe Gould of Defense News writes in January this year that the United States has about 55,000 troops in Japan, including a naval contingent, which makes it the largest forward deployed U.S. force in the entire world. This demonstrates that the United States is fully committed to the defense of Japan, even amid all of the conflict in the region. Contention 2, this proposed revision of Article 9 perpetuates an arms race. This would create a path for Japan to rise as a global military power, which would then lead to an unbalance of power in East Asia, which would provoke an arms race. Journalist Luo Ji of China Daily writes in March of this year that the revision of Japan's constitution would not simply mean Japan having a full-fledged military. It would pave the way for Japan's re-rise as a global military power. That means a reshuffle of the post-war order in East Asia. The revision of the Constitution would aggravate the sovereign disputes in East Asia, worsen the security situation in Northeast Asia, and fuel an arms race. The impact of an arms race in the region would be disastrous, especially considering the threat that China and North Korea pose to the area. In fact, these two nations have already been posing a threat to the region for some time. According to a Pentagon report from September of 2020, China has become the largest navy in the entire world. And the annual U.S. Department of Defense Military and Security Development report from November of 2021 further confirmed this earlier Pentagon report. North Korea, on the other hand, has been testing many missiles, and in March of this year they launched a new missile which ended up landing in Japanese territorial waters and was described as possibly being their largest missile ever by Japanese authorities. Considering these recent developments for these two threats, this revision to Article 9 would only give more of an incentive to the Chinese and North Korean governments to further develop and expand on these capabilities. For these reasons, please vote con.
Okay, cool. So that was our first speaker on the con.
Wait, how long was that to be?
Probably about 3 minutes. So try to add a little bit more.
It was like 2:30.
Yeah.
That was fine.
Okay. How about my pro? How's my pro doing?
Alright, ready?
My cuties on the pro. Let me get this thing set up real quick. Who's the first speaker?
I am.
You
Just
are?
put it on the other side of your.
I'm doing this. Watch this.
Well, you're doing it so much more complicated.
Well, it's fun. Alright, go ahead.
Ravi and I affirm pro for the sake of definitions. We define aggression as the act of physically or figuratively threatening the possibility of violence in any sense. We define denuclearization as the act of stripping nuclear and military power from a nation. Capabilities as the power ability to do something. Contention 1, countering aggression. Japan has a history of bad relations with the Chinese government stemming from their constant attack during World War II. Since Japan has lost their military due to their actions in said war. However, almost a century later, relations have yet to be mended. The Pew Research Organization states in an article from September 13th of 2016, the two East Asian nations have century-old relationships punctured by major conflict and strife. More recently, Beijing and Tokyo have been at loggerheads about sovereignty over the Seppuku Islands in the East China Sea. it's shown by their differing names, as the Japanese call them seppuku and the Chinese call them diaoyo, showing that there's still strife in their relations. China is seen as very aggressive, especially due to their recent attacks on Uyghur and commonly known desire to take Taiwan. Japan being so close to China and already having such a bad history is all the more reason to have a military ready for defense and nuclearization ready for said defense. Although Wadsworth 19 shows Japan's fear that the US won't come to aid in this case of invasion due to Chinese-US relations, China's constant desire to take Taiwan also puts Japan at risk for invasion. Patent 19 shows that Japan is heavily reliant on US for defense, and abandonment of said reliance without allowing Japan rearmament would be fatal to Japan due to Chinese aggression. As a Council of Foreign Organizations article from January of 18th of 2022 states, an often overlooked but critical factor in the extent to which any U.S. response to Chinese aggression would require the use of its forces in Japan and significant Japanese cooperation and logistical support, showing that if China's very likely attack on Taiwan occurs, Japan would be at risk since the U.S. military forces in East Asia are stationed in Japan. This makes them the head center for attack against China if nuclear war or war in general to break out between the US and China. Contention 2. Japanese safety is a prominent concern. Failure to counter China's growing relative strength in Asia means that China's domination on economic arrangements and technological safety will continue to grow rapidly. The USDC found on December 12, 2016 that the balance of military power in Asia has shifted away from the US and its allies to China, to China's accelerated defense spending as well as their advancement in nuclear power and budget. Allen finds in that China's power gives them assertiveness on regional security and economic frameworks in Asia as a whole, showing that Japan needs to hold firm against China's aggression. Ross Babbage finds on December 14th of 2016 that the failure to deter Chinese adventurism threatens to undermine the entire rule-based global order. China's large geographical stance is also an alarming threat to Japan. Babbage also finds that the Obama administration failed to recognize and counter China's territorial expansion in the South China Sea. However, it isn't just China that Japan must worry over. Bruce Killinger finds on August 16th of 2021 that North Korea has a history of launching and testing nuclear missiles and submarine missiles near Japanese coast. And the threats that North Korea presented towards Japan significantly undermines national security in the region, not only for Japan and their citizens, but for the U.S. as well, as the U.S. would then be pulled into an all-out nuclear conflict with North Korea. Allowing China's bullying of Japan to continue would have horrendous costs to the U.S. and Asia as a whole. Chao 18 finds that China's geographical and political influence expansion will lead to an all-out hegemonic war. But by allowing Japan proper military and nuclear weapons, they would have the ability to defend themselves. The simple possession of said nuclear power would begin to halt China's influence, especially with the Seppuku Islands in the East China Sea that Japan and China are currently at an all-out debate over. Contention 3, U.S. benefit. Japan already is a great ally to the U.S. through trade and media consumption. However, militarily and geographically could be one of the U.S.'s greatest allies. Located very close to China, which is already seen as a threat. An FBI.gov article in 2021 states that China is a grave threat to the economic well-being and U.S. democratic values. Japan's geographic location near China, yet being an island, also gives the U.S. great advantages. As Wadsworth 19 states, that nuclearization and militarization of Japan would give the U.S. a counter to the recently heightened Chinese naval activity, especially due to the Department of Defense budget cuts over the last decade. Jeff Kingston found on November 11, 2020, that Japan already has the most advanced navy in Asia and has the highest annual Air Force defense budget in the world of $50 billion. And Roseberry 15 shows that Japan is more than willing to strengthen ties with the U.S. and details how they seek more of an active role in international defense. Giving Japan a more powerful role would greatly benefit the U.S.'s ability to maintain peace and democracy all over the world. With all this said, vote in the affirmation.
Nice. All right. You guys ready for questioning?
Yeah.
This is Crossfire between Daniel and my boy over here. The two Ds.
You want to get the first question?
Yeah.
First question. All right.
So you mentioned nuclearization in your case, correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay. So wouldn't moving nukes to Japan show aggression against China, which would possibly start a war in that area, like between the two nations?
The fact that the U.S. is one of the biggest nuclear powers in the world would deter said war from happening. Don't forget that Japan already is at risk since every single U.S. Military force is stationed in the center of Japan. And it wouldn't be moving nuclear power to Japan. It would more be allowing Japan the ability to produce their own nuclear power in defense. That's specific. That's important in defense only. They cannot use nuclear power in offense.
Right, but wouldn't you agree that China would definitely see that as a threat?
They possibly could. However, China's already seen as very hostile, right? The likelihood of China going into an all-out nuclear war is already higher than it should be, as tensions with China between Japan and the U.S. are at an all-time high. However, with the U.S.'s backing and NATO as well as other U.S. allies backing, China would not get into a war.
So why would they need nukes if the U.S. is already there in that area?
Well, actually, just like I stated, during the Cold War, the Japanese civilian during the Cold War, it was seen in Japan that the U.S. almost abandoned them as tensions between Japan and China were extremely high. This is the basis for this resolution to even come into play. The fear that U.S. won't come to aid Japan when it
Is
comes
the
down
Cold
to
War
it.
really like a good example, like considering
It
how
is a
long
good
ago
war. It is. Don't forget
how long
that.
ago was
Well, actually, that leads me to one of my questions. Don't forget, Article 9 was put into place after World War II in 1940s. That was almost 100 years ago. Don't you
Yeah,
think
but
that a
Article
100-year-old amendment to their constitution is too old as well?
But Article 9 hasn't really been like utilized that much. And
What do you mean?
When
It has
when
100%
could've.
been utilized. Japan was stripped of almost their entire,
The last
their
time Article-
complete offensive capabilities, and they now no longer have the ability to produce any sort of nuclear, submarine, or airstrike capabilities. Not even for defense.
I mean, do you have a question?
Yeah, so you stated that the U.S. is fully committed to assisting Japan. However, as I stated during the Cold War, when the U.S. in a sense abandoned Japan, which completely rose tensions between Japan and the U.S., that proves to Japanese civilians and the Japanese government the U.S. won't always be available to assist them, even if there is a desire to. So wouldn't allowing Japan nuclearization simply for defense be a benefit to all of the Japan civilians as well as the Japanese government as a whole?
No, because the threat of China is way too strong, especially North Korea. Like you're
Well,
basically starting an arms
As I
race, and
stated,
they've already started to strengthen up in that area that China has.
as I stated as well, giving Japan nukes for defense
That's
isn't
fine.
just a.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
I started 30 seconds. Like,
Right.
you can take prep or you can start.
We have like 3 minutes total or 2 minutes?
You have 3 minutes total of prep.
Okay, I'm gonna take like a sec. So,
Okay, can you guys start timing? Someone time prep for me.
tell me when it's 30 seconds.
Okay, it's starting right now.
Should not have started you there. That's what I told you stop saying. Sorry. The case is pretty dependent on the fact that
Are you recording the prep? Yeah, I'm recording prep. I'm just recording the whole thing.
Okay, I'm done. I'm done using this.
How much prep was used?
that was 25 seconds.
Okay.
28 seconds.
25.
Okay, we'll just say they have 2 minutes and 30 seconds remaining.
Nah, yeah, thank you.
Will that change?
2 minutes 32
Well,
seconds.
how much of a tip did you make yesterday?
I made 45, but I forgot my wallet, so I owe you about $6.
Actually, you can buy me lunch at Congress.
Sounds good.
Alright. Sounds good.
All right, gentlemen.
Okay.
We can play double or nothing for next week.
Oh yeah, true.
Okay, so I will go on furthering our case and then I'll go by attacking theirs. So our first contention is basically saying that Japan is under the protection of the United States, and while our opponent does say that in the Cold War, things like that.
My bad. Go ahead.
Or things that have happened decades ago, and we're in a completely different era. It shows that the alliance is not as strong, or that they may abandon them, but that hasn't been the case. The U.S. and Japan's alliance has been one of the cornerstones of the U.S. security policy in East Asia for decades, and now Japan's role in global security has furthermore increased. And again, us saying that it would start an arms race, there have been there have been several times as to when North Korea has shown somewhat aggression. Again, as we stated, their biggest missile yet landing in Japanese waters, as well as China's military is ever growing, as we've seen. So, and against their case, They say that Japan has a bad relation with China. I'm not really sure how that ties into effect here because either they have a bad relation with China and so moving nukes there would cause aggression, or you believe that we have, which means that we should not move nukes there, or we believe that America's standing in there has enough deterrence away to keep China away from Japan. And in this situation, China wanting to take Taiwan, we've seen that for several decades now, and we haven't really seen much headway happen there. And again, moving nukes to Japan shows aggression, and Japan has one of the best militaries in the world. They're ranked number 5 in military defense, and Japan can already defend themselves, as I've already stated, because their defense is adequate enough. And again, China attacking Japan, there's no real reason to, because there's no real economic benefit other than economic coercion, which doesn't really, you don't really need. China's, you can do that in more suitable ways than attacking them. And right now, war would just be expensive for everyone, which, in my opinion, which is why we urge you to vote.
Can I have 45 seconds?
A minute.
Yes, just go ahead and time it for me, because
Yeah, I got you.
I'm running it off of this phone.
Let me get my stuff done.
Can you turn that back on?
I live in the dark.
Go to bed in the dark.
Potted pillars on down.
That was a light shattering contention. How much prep has been used?
45 seconds. Sir.
Keep it going.
Keep going? Okay.
Yeah, but they're about to go through the whole 2 minutes.
It's 3.
Yeah, but they already used it.
Sometimes I'm always plugged in over there.
Good, good.
I'm with Darian giving Roddy the worst advice he's ever heard in his entire life.
I love Darian, guys. I got that.
We know.
So, can we actually get your card on when you said Japan has the 5th best military in defense? Sure.
How much prep's been used?
Minute 25.
Minute 25-ish. I'm waiting on my card.
Okay. You guys can stop prep
Alright.
now if you want.
Yeah, that's what we
Get
did.
the card. Just next time, try to ask for the card before you take prep time, just so you can be like, oh, can we have that card? And then you get it, and then you're like, okay, we're gonna go ahead and start prep right now.
Okay. So waste time. Got it. I know that's exactly what I did.
Okay, yeah,
You ready?
we're waiting on the card.
Dude, how many cards do you need?
Just one.
No, it's just one.
We're
We
literally
just said
asking
it
for just
multiple
one
times.
card.
Did you get it?
No,
I'm
not
trying
yet.
to find it. I had it earlier. I should not have deleted it.
I mean, if you don't want to use it.
If you need. I have all my cards right. I have all my cards.
I'll just logically destroy it.
Not just that.
Here for having the back.
So, switch
The
off.
thing is, you can't introduce evidence in some.
Can you charge
So
it?
if I do bring up any
From my computer?
Okay, yeah,
No.
cards. I have all of them.
You need to get better at Crossfire. You let him talk for so long.
Mm.
2 minutes on one question.
Oh my.
Come on, boys.
Dude, okay, I'm trying to find it. Shut up.
Fine. It's fine. I don't.
Alright.
You need it.
I'll trust that you have it.
No, we're not trusting anything.
No. Go ahead. Just for time's sake, we'll go ahead.
We need to finish this.
For time's sake, we'll have him go ahead.
Everyone ready?
I'm ready, but remember, I'm not timing, so make sure to
Let me
time
go sit
yourself.
on that before someone starts.
Okay, you just spin on my mouth, I guess. But that's good.
Oh no! Hey yo! This spot's that walk in.
This spot's gonna hate this video. Alright, Robbie, you ready?
Everyone ready?
You're editing this?
No.
I'll start on my opponent's case and then come back to my own.
Alright, guys, serious time. You are timing though, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, go ahead.
So my opponent's first contention pretty much stipulates the United States will offer protection, but that's exactly what's not going to happen because the United States has zero reason to offer protection to Japan. And if we were to vote in the affirmation, we would see that
So someone requested that earlier. Like what?
if we were to vote in the affirmation, we can see the United States actually loses interest within Japan because Japan, as my opponent said, has the fifth highest rated military in the world, meaning that the United States should pass Article 9 in an effort to reduce its reliance on Asia. There are 50,000 troops that the United States could relocate elsewhere, and we see that the United States has one of the highest military budgets in the world, meaning that if we were to pass today's resolution, we see the United States not only save money, but decrease its reliance on Japan. But secondly, they go on to talk about an arms race, and the United States will do nothing to stop an arms race within the region because China has over 4 million active military members at the current moment, and the United States has 2 million in total. And not only that, we can see that China has so many more troops in the South China Sea than the United States could ever because it has military obligations across the globe in Europe and Asia. And that's exactly why the United States cannot put all of its eggs in one basket and fight China hand in hand. And that is exactly why it needs to let Japan deal with the situation. But also they go and concede the fact that aggression exists in the current status quo within the South China Sea, meaning that the United States should pass Article 9 because the only way that Japan could fight against these aggressors in the status quo is if they invade, meaning that if they launch missiles, if they fly fighter jets, that's the only way in which Japan can do anything, and it can't take any proactive measures, and that is exactly the flaw within today's resolution, because we look towards China, they're 4 billion troops, they're already flying airships over Taiwan, and they have time and time again proven that they want to militarily promote themselves and promote their hegemony across the region, and we can say that North Korea has launched missiles, as my opponent has said, and that is exactly why Japan needs to be empowered in this sort of militarized South China Sea. And not only this, when we look towards the idea that China is not aggressing the South China Sea, we can see that they have imposed themselves on the Senkaku Islands, they have flown airships over Taiwan, and they have also, if you look towards the Russia-Ukraine conflict, we can see that the United States was heavily tied with Ukraine, and now in the status quo, the United States isn't doing that much. Poland and other European Union countries are doing a lot more to help Ukraine, and we can see that same sort of situation would translate over to the South China Sea because the United States, A, does not have the foreign policy, or B, does not have the resources to support a war against another country, and especially the fact that it's China, the United States does not have the ability to defend Japan. And they will say 50,000 troops can deter China, but China has over 10 times that amount, and therefore China really can win this war any way it wants to, and that is exactly why the United States needs to take a hand away from the conflict, and therefore we need to pass today's resolution in the affirmation. But finally, we need to look towards the idea that we need to come back to our case and realize that the aggression within the status quo is prominent, and Japan would be able to counter aggression within the South China Sea because we look towards North Korea, which has a strong nuclear arsenal, and therefore China has made zero moves towards North Korea because it realizes that it does have a military force. We look towards South Korea, which also has a stronger military force than Japan, and therefore China has made no moves over those two countries, but for Taiwan it has. Therefore, if Japan were to get a military force, China would be deterred, and that is the only way in which we can make deterrence happen in the status quo. And then the second thing is that by passing today's resolution, the United States would benefit from the fact that Japan would lose their reliance on the United States, and therefore would help the United States in the long term, and that is exactly why I urge all of you to vote an affirmative ballot in today's debate. Jesus Christ.
All right, thank you, Representative Pita, for that awesome Congress speech.
Shut up.
All right, you guys ready for cross?
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna do cross, and I don't think we'll end it. Okay, just because I don't have too much more battery on my phone. All right, gentlemen, you ready?
Yeah.
All right. Remember 3 minutes. Someone time it for
Yeah.
us.
Robbie's got it.
Robbie's got it. All right, sick. All right, go ahead.
You can have the first question.
How exactly would an arms race play out in the South China Sea?
Not well, which is why we should not.
No, how exactly would the arms race come to conflict?
Well, according to journalist Liu Ji, if we revise Japan's constitution, it would that would cause a reshuffle of the post-war order in East Asia, which would aggravate the sovereignty disputes in East Asia.
May I ask how many of Japan's citizens are currently able to fight in the military right now in order to perpetuate an arms conflict?
I wouldn't be able to tell you.
Well, right now they're on stage 5 of the demographic transition model, meaning that they don't have enough active members in society to fight a war, and therefore there are much stronger nations in the South China Sea that would perpetuate an arms race with China, meaning that even if we do allow Article 9 to pass, it wouldn't perpetuate an arms conflict. Do you have a question?
No, I'm saying it would, if we were to, like, let's say, move nukes over there,
We were never going to move.
or
nukes.
if we gave them the ability to create nukes or whatever, which would, if we remove that, I would think that's the main purpose too.
Well, they still wouldn't be able to create nukes under international nuclear treaties. They would not have the permission to do so.
But my point is, if they were like to increase their military presence, offensive military capabilities, it would aggravate China.
How would it exactly aggravate
Because
China?
it would be seen as aggression by
China has the strongest military in the world,
But it-
arguably. Why would China feel threatened by a small country next to it creating a military force?
Okay, well, because when you're giving offensive military capabilities, Japan would then be able to create, I don't know, missiles. They would be able to create like things that
Then
would.
they would be sanctioned just like North Korea, meaning
Why would they be sanctioned if
because
the,
you're
if the,
violating international
if the
nuclear
U.S. is the
treaties.
one that, well, for the sake of this debate, if the U.S. is the one that's
If the United States lays hands off of Japan, there are still other international organizations that Japan is a part of.
but then why would the U.S., let's say, for the purpose of the debate, why would they give them offensive military capabilities? If
They're
not
saying
allowed?
that they can revise Article 9 in an effort to create offensive military capabilities. The United States is never giving them offensive military
No, I'm
capabilities.
saying you don't think Japan will be able to develop these offensive military capabilities?
To the extent where they would either cause an arms race or aggress China, absolutely not. Because the only country in the status quo that could do that is the United States, and the United States
But I
would.
would say because of their geographical position as to their right.
In the status quo, they have more of a chance of aggressing China because the United States is in Japan rather than if we do revise Article 9.
Is cross 2 minutes or 3 minutes?
3 minutes.
Okay. Do you have another question?
Yeah. How exactly? What net loss is there for the United States to allow Japan to revise Article 9?
Wait, I'm sorry. I kind of.
What does the United States lose by passing today's resolution?
They don't lose anything
Yeah. So why exactly aren't we passing today's resolution?
because it's what benefits Japan and America.
There is no net loss to Japan or America because we're helping Japan.
Okay,
create a military.
that's time. Ravi is still in Congress mode, which is fine. But
They just conceded their whole case.
I know.
I was confused.
Okay.
Right? I wanted.
Hey,
I thought